Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking a document that literally signals a massive structural shift in the whole landscape of global cybersecurity. We're talking about a highly unusual intelligence briefing that just recently sent absolute shockwaves through both the public and private sectors. It's a formal assessment, and it tells us that the foundational rules of cyber warfare and digital defense are changing right underneath our feet.
3. That number represents the incredibly brief, 3-page, unclassified press release issued on June 23, 2026. Now, I know, 3 pages might not sound like a whole lot, but in the world of high-level international espionage and signals intelligence, issuing a public, unclassified document like this fundamentally breaks traditional intelligence protocols. It just doesn't happen.
So, what did those 3 pages actually say? Well, here's the core of it. The document states, the rapid pace of frontier AI development means cyber risk assumptions can become outdated in months, not years. I really want you to hear that final phrase again. In months, not years. This isn't some casual tech prediction or a think tank forecast. This is a formal intelligence assessment, and it should be an absolute wake-up call to every single organization currently relying on standard security planning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly who issued this warning. It was the Five Eyes Alliance. If you're not familiar, this is the powerhouse signals intelligence partnership between the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Historically, these guys operate in absolute strict secrecy. I mean, their operational value literally comes from exclusivity. They share highly classified intelligence assessments only with cleared government officials who have a strict need to know. So for them to deliberately step out of the shadows and issue a public warning to unclassified audiences, to governments and businesses alike, that means this threat has reached a threshold of public consequence that they can no longer keep quiet.
Section 1. Decoding the core message, unpacking the intelligence assessment. We really need to look closely at the deliberate wording the intelligence agencies chose to use here, because in their world, every single word is weighed. The agencies stated that frontier AI models are fundamentally transforming both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. I want you to focus on that word fundamentally. You see, in the intelligence community, they usually hedge their language. They'll use safer words like potentially or incrementally. The use of fundamentally means we aren't just looking at a marginal improvement in how fast someone can hack a system. No, this is a qualitative, structural shift in the very nature of cyber capabilities themselves. The old rules, they are completely out the window.
To make that abstract idea frighteningly concrete, take the number 22. This represents the terrifying 22-second threat handoff window that was already documented at the RSA conference back in March of 2026. In just 22 seconds, a threat can move and adapt. That is the new, blistering speed of cyber warfare that this intelligence assessment is desperately warning us about.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive mismatch we are currently facing. Over in traditional security planning, you've got your annual risk frameworks, your biennial penetration tests, maybe quarterly vulnerability reviews if you're proactive. Now, compare that to the AI-enhanced threat reality. The Five Eyes are telling us this new reality operates in months, not years. If you're assessing your security once a year, but the threat model is changing entirely every few months, well, your assumptions are wrong before your next planning cycle even begins. Reflect on your own organization's planning cycles for a moment. Are they built for traditional planning, or are they ready for this new reality?
Moving to Section 2, the Anthropic Connection, the June 2026 Convergence.
Now, this advisory absolutely did not happen in a vacuum. Let's walk through this rapid-fire timeline to grasp the sheer speed of the governance panic happening behind the scenes. Just 11 days prior to this advisory, the Commerce Department issued an export control directive literally suspending Anthropic's cutting-edge Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models. Why? Because Anthropic themselves disclosed that these models had unprecedented abilities to find software vulnerabilities. 8 days prior, Anthropic and the government began truce talks to figure out some sort of safety protocol. 1 day prior, sweeping quantum executive orders were issued. And then, day 0, the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance publishes their joint AI advisory. We are looking at a sequence of massive, parallel responses by different institutional actors, all reacting to the exact same realization about frontier AI capabilities in the span of just days.
Section 3. Urgency without specificity. Standard advice for a non-standard threat.
So after all that panic, what did the Five Eyes actually recommend that organizations do in response to this unprecedented, fundamentally transformative threat? Well, invest in cyber defenses.
Upgrade old systems, patch faulty software, limit access to critical systems. If you know anything about cybersecurity, you know that these are standard, decades-old practices. Agencies like CISA and NIST have been saying this exact stuff for years. And while it is absolutely correct advice, it highlights a glaring contradiction. They're issuing a blazing red alert about a totally non-standard threat, but they're providing incredibly standard advice.
So why the huge disconnect? Actually, this gap between the advisory's intense urgency and its total lack of operational specificity, it's not a mistake by the authors. It is a structural feature of unclassified intelligence. The Five Eyes Alliance simply couldn't reveal the specific capabilities they were seeing or the specific attack vectors without exposing their classified intelligence sources and methods. And they couldn't make public assessments of specific commercial AI systems without causing massive commercial and political fallout. So they were forced to leave businesses with a terrifying warning about the speed of the threat, but only the absolute most basic instructions on how to defend against it.
Let's move to end and see how this builds into Section 4, the global governance gap, institutional speed limits.
This breakdown lays out the reality of a massive, hidden structural problem. Look at the primary governance instruments compared to their operational timelines. You have the Great American AI Act, proposing independent model audits, but it operates on semi-annual timelines with multi-year enactment periods. State AI laws, they have a 3-year preemption period. The UN Global Mechanism on ICT Security moves at the glacial pace of annual plenaries and biennial meetings. But think back to the threat. The AI threat evolution is measured in months. Neutrally speaking, regardless of the political intent behind any of these laws or mechanisms, every single institutional safeguard on the books, or even currently being drafted, is fundamentally outpaced by the sheer speed of the AI threat.
Which brings us to Section 5, Outpacing the Threat, the reality of our security architecture. So the crucial point is this. On one side, we've got the intelligence assessment telling us loud and clear that speed is the central governance problem of the current moment. The intelligence community has stepped completely out of character to do its job and sound the alarm. But on the other side, we have the governance response, which is simply not yet positioned to complete the required work. The infrastructure to handle a threat that updates every few months, it just doesn't exist yet at an institutional level.
Which basically leaves the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of individual organizations and focused learners like you to understand this dynamic. I want to leave you with this final critical question to chew on. If your threat model updates annually, but the threat evolves monthly, how secure are you today? It's a pretty daunting thought for sure, but acknowledging that gap is the first necessary step toward actually fixing your security posture. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go investigate your own planning cycles. Until next time.